Am I supposed to say something, or are you supposed to?
Well, tell us about pension reform. How are you doing, Senate President?
Nice to see you. How are you?
Good to see you.
Well, I'm very happy we passed the pension bill. It's very, I think, a true bipartisan bill. I think the vote was something like 16 to 14 between the parties, and it's a very difficult vote for people, but we have to do it. And this is the bill that we are sure is constitutional, which is different than the bills that have been passed or introduced in the past. And it's going to save money long term. It's going to save the system. We're going to start we've turned around the state's image with regard to a balanced budget, and now we're doing the same thing with our pensions. Those are the two things we had to take on. The cost of pensions has been rising, the cost of Medicaid has been rising, and we're on the way to stopping both of those from getting out of hand.
So do you say that this will pass over in the House?
Well, I think it will. I mean, because we obviously are going to be voting on the rest of the pension systems this summer before the election. I'm not sure when. We'll meet with the governor and see if we can work out getting an agreement on the issues that are dividing us. But I would say that this one was the easier one to pass because there was no issue about cost shifting with regard to the state employees or the General Assembly. We should point out that this was our system itself, that we applied the same rules to ourselves as we did to all the state employees with regard to the changes in the pension.
Is there already a bill for the other two systems?
It's been drafted, sure.
Would you say the session in general has been successful for you guys, or with the rest of this pension stuff still lingering?
Well, it's been very successful, obviously, because the most important thing we do is pass a budget. And the budget we passed last year was really, as it turned out, the Medicaid costs were $2 billion more than what we spent, or what we authorized to spend. So we fell behind again. This year, we know, because of the Medicaid reforms, that we're going to only spend as much as we authorized to spend, which is truly, for the first time in many years, a balanced budget. So the second thing we had to do was to take care of the pension problem. This was a good start tonight. The same model of cooperation can be used over in the House. When you pass a bill out of one chamber, it's usually pretty easy to see how you can pass the same with the same combination of votes over in the other chamber. So there still are one big issue dealing with how you deal with transferring of cost from the school districts, some money from the school districts to the state, but that's something we can still work on.
Do you anticipate?
I'm sorry. Why shouldn't anybody just think you guys are passing this just to give yourself political credit?
Wow, because there's no reason. We're coming back. We're not coming back in November. We're coming back before that. We'll have to work with the governor and the speaker to see when we do it, specifically to pick up pension reform. And this bill is already past one chamber. We've sent the signal to the bond community that this is something which we're taking seriously. That wasn't easy to vote for that bill. Nobody here wants to vote for a bill that's not going to be called in the House. I have every reason to believe that it'll be called. We ran out of time.
The speaker said he'd called it.
Well, I don't think he has introduced the same bill or components of the same bill. This is a component of the same bill he's introduced. So there's difference in opinion.
But it has to go back to the House to be voted on. Will it require a 60% vote when it goes back to the House on this bill that you passed this evening?
It depends on. They could change the effective date, and we could only have a majority vote.
If it were effective in January as opposed to...
we could vote again in January to make it immediate. So that's not something we couldn't overcome.
Do you anticipate next week meeting with the other three leaders and the governor?
Yes.
Do you have a date set or a time set?
Is it your intention to send this gambling bill directly to the governor?
Yes. The last time we held the gaming bill at the governor's, not his request, but to benefit the governor so he had time to review it. This bill the governor is aware of. It's a big improvement over what he didn't like in the last bill. And then Senator Link has indicated he's filed another bill which represents further compromise with the governor. So I'm sure that by the time we get to November, we can. I'm optimistic we can reach some kind of agreement on gaming.
Do you think the governor will sign this bill?
No.
Can you 36 votes?
We won't have to. I expect we'll have an agreement with the governor, so we only need 30 votes, and we will work on that in the veto session.
Mr. President, what was your take kind of with the holdup on pensions in the House, the developments that started last night?
Yeah. There's a very important issue that we can compromise on. And it has to do with, start off with the anomaly that in the city of Chicago, we don't receive any money from the state for our teachers' pension fund. And yet we're paying $2.5 billion for the suburban and downstate teachers. So that's an anomaly that's been in the law for many years, and as the pension costs have increased, that disparity has become so great that we have to really address that. And the way we've decided to address it, and I think even the Republican leaders agree, we have to have local school districts have some skin in the game when they negotiate contracts. And that means that when they negotiate contracts, they have to be responsible to put aside some money for the pension system. So we understand that. We don't want that to result in property tax increase for them either. So this is something which we ran out of time to get an agreement. We can work on it in a special session with the leaders, and I believe it's something we can arrive at a compromise on.
You believe that
You think Illinois will ever have a balanced budget?
election?
I'm sorry, one second.
You believe you can get that done before the election?
Oh, that would be the goal for sure. Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, given that there are so many billions of bills that are still, that the comptroller can't pay off right away, how many years is it going to take for Illinois to get back to a real balance?
Well, first of all, when you say a budget going forward into next year, what's significant is we expect that as a result of the actions we took, that we're not going to spend any more than we take in. We still will have some old bills. There's no question about that. But this budget itself pays down, I think, $1.2 billion of those. So it shows you the path by which we could pay them down. There are some that would still say the best way to do that is to go out and borrow the money that you owe people from your lenders instead of your vendors, pay all those people off, and then now you have a bank debt that you can pay off the top when you do your budget every year. That's something which requires 3/5 vote. We haven't been able to convince the Republicans to do that, but that's still something we could consider.
President Cullerton, Leader Radonio has suggested that over the next 3 years you should cut spending so that revenue exceeds spending by approximately $2.5 billion a year. If you did that for 3 years, she said you can pay off your Medicaid bills that are stacked up. Do you think that's feasible?
Yeah, we invited the Republicans this year to sit down and to tell us how we could work with them on a budget, and they were a little reluctant. We finally asked them what their goal was. They said they wanted to get to a certain number in the year 2016, but that would have resulted in another $1.2 billion worth of cuts beyond what we just did. And we said, okay, fine, let's start deciding where that $1.2 billion would be cut from, and they didn't want to go any further than that and be more specific, because that would be so painful to do that. So we cut, I think, as much as we could. And so as a result, we have a balanced budget this year, and we're paying off some of our old bills.
Mr. President, some folks are going to look at what happened today and see that the bill on pension reform didn't get to the governor, but a bill on casino gambling did. How you?
Well, I guess it depends on how you report. I mean, you know, we're not coming back in November. We're coming back to finish the pensions maybe in a matter of weeks. So this was a really good first step. This was the first major vote in any chamber on a major pension reform. This bill has also been introduced. The identical language has been introduced by the Speaker. And we know that there's support for it on the Republican side in the House. So it's very likely. On the gaming bill, I've just told you, and you know, that the governor's going to veto this bill. So then we will have negotiations on the gaming bill in the fall. So what's going to happen is we're going to have a pension bill before we have the gaming bill. That's what I would report.
Do you think what you do on pensions by November, you and the Republicans, will be sufficient to take the pension issue off the table as an election issue?
Oh, we're not talking about minor steps here. We're talking about major steps. We're talking about billions of dollars in unfunded liability being reduced and getting on a path to have lower payments over the next 30 years. So these are major. And we'll let the rating agencies decide whether they think it's sufficient. I think it would be very, very meaningful. And that's why the Civic Federation has said that they're so strongly in favor. People who advocated for other forms have said this is a significant
Civic
bill.
Committee as well?
And Civic Committee, the people that were pushing the bills that I felt were unconstitutional, look at this and they acknowledge it overcomes the constitutional argument and it's a significant cuts. And it's done in a constitutional way.
Given the difficult votes that have had to be taken this year, either side of the aisle do better in the election this fall, and either side come out with advantage?
I don't think there's any advantage either way politically from what we've done. I think we've acted very responsibly. We actually had some Republican votes for the parts of our budget tonight, so you can say we had bipartisan support on the budget, bipartisan support on Medicaid cuts, bipartisan support on pension reform. Those are the big three things we worked on. So I think both sides can say they work together and we're responsible.
There were calls on the House floor for unions to kind of put some more skin in the game. They've been critical, but maybe come up with their own ideas and what would be acceptable for pension reform.
I think it's very difficult for the union leaders to support pension reform because I don't think that their members are fully come around to understand what the problem is and maybe not really understand what the solution is. So I think it just takes time. It takes time for legislators. It's a real complicated issue. I've learned a lot about it over the months. I've been kind of involved in all these meetings, and even some of our own members, they only heard about the effect of this bill for the first time, and it affects them. There's individual legislators here who have to make a decision as to whether they give up their health care. So it's a real personal issue, and so I don't. I think this is akin to the bill we passed for McCormick Place. Unions were against it. They sued us. They picketed us, and the bill resulted in them actually getting more work. It was a pro-union bill that they didn't really appreciate at the time. And this bill is designed to help the union's pension fund remain stable and help us be able to pay more money for school aid, more money for even their pay raises by saving money today, all by just urging people to give up some really lucrative future benefits way in the future. That's how we find it. That's how we fund it. So I'm not mad at them for their opposition. I just think that when it sinks in, we're really trying to help them.
President Cullerton, what's your position on the cost shift? Is that something?
Well, especially being from Chicago and being aware of this anomaly, I think there's a matter of fairness. But most importantly, it's the principle of having a school district have to be able to negotiate contracts and never have to worry about what the pensions are. So that's because they don't have to pay next to nothing. Right now they pay next to nothing into the pension system. And we have, by lowering the benefits, which we've accomplished with this bill, that those normal costs that we're talking about are much lower. So we've lowered the amount that we're asking them to pay, given them more time to pay. I just think it's something which we can really reach an agreement on. So I'm hoping to do that.
Do you think that Speaker Madigan did the right thing by handing this issue off, basically
that's
to
House,
Tom Cross, Leader Cross?
I don't know what the tactic was or who the sponsor is. We have now passed this bill. We've done it in a bipartisan way. We weren't yelling and screaming at each other. And we have an even split on the vote, and so we hope that this House will follow suit.
How was that meeting with the four leaders yesterday? Was it kind of frosty there at the end?
Not with me. I get along with all of them.
Oh.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.